Good afternoon, and welcome to the Montrose League of Women Voters presentation of Behavioral Health and Law Enforcement Responding Together. I'm Jan Edwards, president of the Montrose League of Women Voters, serving also Delta County and soon Ouray County. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization which never endorses or supports any political party or candidates. For 101 years, the League has educated voters and advocated regarding issues of vital importance to all Americans. I hope you will enjoy and benefit from this presentation, which member Carol Howe will moderate for us. Carol?
Thank you, Jan. Good afternoon. My name is Carol Howe. As Jan said, I will be the moderator for this afternoon's program, Behavioral Health and Law Enforcement Responding Together. Throughout our country, communities have been seeing an increase in emergency situations involving persons with addiction or other mental health issues. Questions surrounding who should respond and how they should respond are being asked. One of the best practices being used is a CoResponse model, where teams of law enforcement and mental health professionals respond together. Our program this afternoon will be a panel discussion about how our local law enforcement and mental health clinicians work together when responding to emergency situations involving behavioral health related issues. The panel of experts joining me for this discussion include Tim Cox, Patrol Captain with the Montrose Police Department, Ty Cox, Lieutenant with the Montrose County Sheriff's Office, Laura Bayard, a licensed professional counselor and regional director from Montrose, Ouray, and San Miguel County with the Center for Mental Health, and Catherine Burke, also a licensed professional counselor and co-responder for Montrose with the Center for Mental Health. Thank you all for joining us. I will be asking our panelists questions that were developed by League members to get a broad understanding of how the CoResponse program works in our counties. Each panelist will be asked the same or related question, and we will rotate the order in which the panelists answer each question. Actually, all of our panelists are in the same room, so we will get a panel response. It will be a true panel discussion. And we have a timekeeper who will keep us on track if necessary. Audience members can submit questions via the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screens. Please identify which panelist you are directing your question to, if possible. We will try to answer as many questions as possible during the last 5 minutes of our program. All of our panelists work directly in the CoResponse program, but because they work for different agencies with different responsibilities and service areas, their answers should give us a very good understanding of how this CoResponse model works for our counties. We will be recording this webinar, and it will be made available on our website, lwvmontrose.org. I want to remind our panelists to mute themselves when they are not talking and to make sure their phones are silent so we are not interrupted. And the audience is in listen-only mode. Let's get started. So first, what is the CoResponse program? And how do the interagencies work together? How long has the program been in operation? How is it funded? How do you coordinate with other counties?
Thanks, Carol. Good afternoon. This is Tim Cox, and just going to give a broad overview of the CoResponse program. So we partnered with Center for Mental Health, Montrose Police Department, Montrose County Sheriff's Office to create this CoResponse program to benefit individuals in our community. Our program, kind of an overview, we partner mainly with Catherine, who's our co-responder. She responds part of the day to the Montrose Police Department and part of the day to the Montrose County Sheriff's Office. And if there is an individual in our community that has a behavioral health issue or substance abuse issue, and officers arrive on scene, make the scene safe, Catherine then comes in and responds to the scene and assesses that individual to see if there is any mental health behavioral health or substance abuse need. And then from that point, it's determined where that individual, how we help that individual. I'll leave it at that. And if anybody else has anything else they want to add to it, please do.
Sure. No, I think that's perfect introduction, Tim. Thank you for that. And really the goals of the program are to decrease law enforcement involvement with our community members where it's a primarily mental health or behavioral health issue, and decrease the need for further emergency room placement. So it's really best practices to meet our community members where they need and provide them the resources and supports that they would most benefit from.
Does anybody else have anything else to add to that? Okay.
I don't think they covered it pretty well.
All right. Okay. So how do you determine, you touched on this, but how do you determine the need for co-response? And how does the public request this type of response?
Sure. So if a community member were to reach out to dispatch, then law enforcement would take it from there.
So ideally, the main thing is said earlier, the community members can call dispatch, they can call the Center for Mental Health, but through our co-response program, everything is really routed through our dispatch center, Wesco, that can be reached at 911 or 249-9110 is a non-emergent line. And then an officer is dispatched to the scene initially to make sure the scene is secure and safe. And then once the scene's safe, like we spoke about earlier, then we contact the co-responder, who's Catherine, and she responds to the scene, and then that's where the evaluation starts. Then the end goal is to make sure that our community is getting the services they need, like Laura said, and then also lessen the time that law enforcement is on scene and dealing with the individual. Has made a huge difference in our response and freeing up our officers to be able to respond to other calls for service.
Yeah, and it really is, I mean, the words co-response mean we're co-responding and we're collaborating together. So bringing the best of both law enforcement and mental health together to support an individual and their needs. And so we do that, and I'll let Catherine describe a little bit about how we partner together, if that's helpful. So although Catherine is employed at the Center for Mental Health, this is truly a partnership. So let her speak to that.
Absolutely. So when a call comes through dispatch, it's on a case-by-case basis, how I am helpful in that particular situation. Sometimes I may follow up to a referral after a call if I'm not available for some reason to make sure everything's going well, to offer them various services in town and that the center offers. I may support them by helping them secure a safety plan so they can be safe after the call that law enforcement I've been called to has ended, and address whatever reason law enforcement was called in the first place. So hopefully they're able to stabilize and be safe in the community without having to have law enforcement respond in a similar way again. I may also support them by having them be connected with withdrawal management at the Center for Mental Health or a crisis stabilization unit, or on a case-by-case basis, a hospital is another option sometimes.
I'd like to add to that too. I think Catherine hit one of the important points is the follow-up that she does with the community members that seek these services or need these services in our community. From a law enforcement perspective, it's so much helped us and decrease the amount of times we're dealing with these community members that are having these crises or in this crisis. And we've seen a huge reduction, in my opinion, in the amount of follow-up and the amount of times we end up contacting with these individuals. And it also keeps them from committing crimes and keeps them out of the judicial system, which is our ultimate goal, getting them help and keep them out of trouble, basically.
And both, I would say both the Montrose Police Department and the Montrose County Sheriff's Office have been amazing partners for the Center for Mental Health. Catherine actually works out of their offices, building partnerships and relationships with the police department and the sheriff's office staff. And so she is able to fill that role and liaison between the agencies and really advocating for our community members with whatever they need, making sure they get connected to the services that would best benefit them.
To answer the second part of that, the Montrose Police Department and the Center for Mental Health have been in a partnership since 2018. And I got a credit to Center for Mental Health and our former chief, Tom Chin, did an excellent job. We were one of the front runners in the state, if not the country, for the co-responder program. And then to continue on with it, our current partners with Center for Mental Health, Laura, Catherine, the department itself, the sheriff, current sheriff, Gene Lillard, and our current chief, Blaine Hall. I think this is a great thing for our community. It's been proven to be very beneficial, and I think it has made a difference in our community.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that also. In 2019 when we came on board with Sheriff's Office, that was when Sheriff Lillard took office, and seeing the PD and Center for Mental Health going through this program, we knew definitely that's something we want to do, and we got on board as soon as possible, and it's done wonders. Really has. Like I said, like Tim talked about earlier, we don't deal with the same people as much. They're getting the help they need. It's just been a great program, and we're glad to be part of it.
Wonderful. I don't want to cut you off on anything. So everything sounds like it's here in Montrose proper. Does it extend out to the county or to our adjacent counties in any way? Is there any coordination with our adjacent counties?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The team that is here today is our Montrose team. And so Montrose County Sheriff's Office and the Montrose Department. And then we do also have a team in Delta that works with the Delta Police Department, the Delta County Sheriff's Office, with Paonia and Hotchkiss and Cedar Edge. And so those are both with the Center for Mental Health, but just different law enforcement agencies. So it's different teams, but we work in the same way. So yes, we do have support for Delta County as well. And then the Center for Mental Health is able to fund these positions through our grant with the Office of Behavioral Health. And so we're very fortunate to have that funding for our behavioral health professionals to be able to co-locate and work with our law enforcement agencies. So we're grateful for that. And then we partner, of course, with the Sheriff's Office and Police Department for other funding for training and vehicle, and I'll let them speak to that.
Yeah, kind of on the funding part of it for the Sheriff's Office. Just recently we sent Catherine to crisis intervention training, which we paid for. So we all help out with the funding through grants, which Laura can speak on a little more. Like I said, the police department and the vehicle, but we all kind of help there. Truly is a partnership.
And I would agree. I think Ty and Lauren hit all the points we need to talk about. So it is a true partnership. It's a benefit to our community. And I think we're seeing, like I said earlier, a big difference that it's already made and impacted our community. To add to that too, I think another thing that's really helped our community is the Crisis Walk-in Center and the Mobile Crisis Unit, which I think we'll talk about a little later, but encompass all together, it's a great program.
Okay, thank you. Now you brought up the Crisis Walk-in Center. That ties in with the follow-up, I would think. I understand you are seeing much less repeat contacts with people. Could you talk a little bit more about how that Crisis Walk-in Center works with your, or how the Crisis Center works with your CoResponse program?
Sure. Did you want to speak to that?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, I can speak to that. So when we're really fortunate in our community to have the Crisis Walk-in Center and the Crisis Stabilization Unit as an option for people to go to when they're in crisis, in addition to me responding directly to a scene. So one of the options when I do respond to a call is to offer someone the option of staying at our crisis stabilization unit. And a lot of people do accept that offer, and it's a wonderful resource, as well as withdrawal management as well. If I'm not on call and available at the time, the Crisis Walk-in Center is always an option, and they also host our mobile response unit as well, who can respond in lieu of a co-responder if I'm not available at that time. They're a really great additional option and a backup option if I'm not available.
Sounds wonderful. You mentioned, Ty mentioned that you went to some crisis counseling training. What kind of training is required for a crisis counselor and or a law enforcement officer? And then is there special training beyond that for the co-responder program?
So the training that I have is I have a master's in counseling, and I'm also a licensed professional counselor in the state of Colorado. All of our therapists are master's level educated, and I also went to the CIT training, the crisis intervention training, as well as Ty mentioned, and have several years experience in crisis work. As to the law enforcement crisis training, I'll let Tim and Ty speak to that.
Yeah, so Sheriff's Office, we send our deputies to de-escalation training annually. We do that every year and have been for probably 5 years or so. We also strive to send everyone to the crisis intervention training. It's a great training, same one that Catherine went to. We don't have everyone through that yet, but we're trying. You know, obviously COVID didn't help this year with that, but trying to get everyone here at the Sheriff's Office through that. It's a week training, excellent training. So that's kind of what we're doing here at the Sheriff's Office.
I'd piggyback what Ty said, exactly what we're doing at the PD. Again, that CIT training is invaluable. It's one of the best trainings I've ever been to for a street officer, patrol officer working the road. It's amazing. And just the way you learn to talk with individuals, whether no matter what crisis they're involved in, the training itself is a 40-hour training. They utilize world renowned actors. It's incredible. You don't think you're at a training. You think you're dealing with an individual that may have schizophrenia or some other behavioral, not even a big behavioral health issue, but they're in some kind of type of crisis, and you feel like you're really there in that moment, like if you're working the road. So it really benefits our officers to get that type of training and to see how to de-escalate the situation where you may not have to use force. In previous years to those trainings, it all comes down to communication and how we communicate with the community. And again, like Ty said, the de-escalation is training that's very important for us too. And if we can openly communicate with an individual and not have to use force, that's the ultimate goal. And then get that individual the help they need without having to use a judicial system, take them to jail, take them to the hospital, and maybe to get them that the resources they need right there on scene. And they might not have to even touch the crisis walk-in center or the hospital or jail.
And how often is a response call complicated by mental health issues? And how has the COVID pandemic affected the need for this service in the last year?
I guess I start with the pandemic itself. We saw a reduction in calls for service up front at the beginning of it. It's so hard to predict what's going to occur. We were just talking before this. This month, we've been busy, and Catherine's had a lot of referrals and a lot of calls. It's just so up and down, so it's hard to pinpoint the best time or the time when somebody is in a crisis and we need to respond with the team. But overall, I think there was, with Montrose PD on that side, we did see lower calls for service for sure at the beginning of it. And then it picked up midsummer, but everybody was pretty much locked down for the first or the start of the pandemic.
Yeah, sheriff's office, same thing, same as PD. We usually kind of have the same trends anyhow, for the most part, but we did see a reduction except this last month, like Tim said.
And ladies, how has your business been affected during the COVID pandemic? Has there been an increased need for your services?
No, I mean, I think same to everyone's point, everyone kind of, individually took care of their families and needs. And so over the last year, I would hope that as we kind of all move towards something approaching more normal, that people feel like they need supports, that they'll reach out. Our ultimate goal would be that people come early, right? Like we want prevention, we want early intervention, and we would like people to access the services that they need and deserve as early as possible, and know that the support line through the center is available if they get in a place where they're just not really sure what to do or what to do for their loved one. We're available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to call. People can outreach at 970-252-6220 and just call and talk to a staff member with the center to see what might their need be and how we can support them.
So this may be where you might be a little different on some of your responses. What are the limitations or bottlenecks to providing this CoResponse program? And if you had unlimited budgets, what would you like to add to the CoResponse program?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of chuckling, but obviously we do have limited budgets. We have enough funding for one position in Montrose, but Catherine is available, during the shifts that she's available. And then we partner with law enforcement through our mobile response when she's not on shift. But so if we had unlimited funding, we would hire another person. You guys maybe want to speak to like the realities of that.
Yeah, so we really are very thankful for the support we do get from our agencies in general. But it does come down to funding, and being able to fund a co-responder 24/7 is ideal. And then also eventually we'd like to get it to where co-responder responds with the same officers. So you have a more cohesive unit. They work together all the time. That would be ideal. But right now it's just not doable. It's not having somebody on, like I spoke to earlier, it's hard to tell when a crisis is going to occur. And right now we're mainly operating our co-responder during the day. So evening hours, late into the night, it would be great to have one 24/7, but reality is we can't fund that right now.
I completely agree with what Laura and Tim said. To have a 24-hour co-responder, I think would be ideal for the community, but we're just not there.
Yeah. And in some other communities, they like on the Front Range, right, that where it's bigger and there's different funding, they do have that team that Commander Cox is describing, where it is a trained officer and behavioral health professional who respond together to a scene. We don't necessarily have that. We don't have that here, but also there's benefits of that too. That Catherine works with lots of different officers and goes out to respond, and so that connection and partnering and learning from each other and working together is also a benefit. So, whichever way you structure the program, there's pros and cons.
To add to that too, with the pandemic, we haven't been able to train as much, and that's one of our goals as a team is to cross-train. Catherine training our officers, and then like the CIT training that she went to from a law enforcement perspective is also very important. So that's something that's coming in the future that we can do without a whole lot of money or funds, that we have plans moving forward with.
I read in the newspaper just recently that our state legislature was dealing with the granting opportunities through the Department of Labor, and that currently only law enforcement agencies can apply for those grants. Do you see that changing? Would that provide any additional funding if mental health associations could also, or mental health agencies could apply for that funding as well?
Carol, you cut out for a second, but I think you're talking about Dolo grants. Is that what you?
Yes. Are the Dolo grants going to be made available to just law enforcement, or are they available also to the mental health organizations?
To be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about that side of it. We have a gentleman that works for the city, Kendall Kramer, that does all of our grant writing. And that's something I could sure follow up on and get back to you about and the community about, but to give you an honest answer, I don't know.
Yeah, and the center has partnered with law enforcement agencies throughout our region with Dolo grants over the years. And so happy to work in whatever ways, possible to partner and support our communities.
With Dolo though, that is how we were able to purchase the co-responder vehicle. That way we can safely, or Catherine can safely transport somebody that may be obviously not a threat to anybody, and also that doesn't tie up a law enforcement officer, so we can respond to other calls for service. So that's a great thing. We are thankful to Dolo for getting that grant, and we're able to utilize it with this co-response team.
All right. Let's see, Susan, do we have any questions from the audience that we could bring in?
Yes, I have 4 questions at this time and would certainly welcome more. We have a question about what is the percentage of calls that require or involve mental health? You have a way to estimate the percentage of your calls that require co-response?
I don't have a percentage, and I can assure you between substance abuse and behavioral factors for the mental health, it's a lot. But our co-responder response, it's just up and down. I don't have a percentage, but I don't know, we can probably talk to how many cases you maybe get kind of in a week, but between alcohol, substance abuse, law enforcement in general, that quite a bit. But the co-responder program itself, I don't know if we have a percentage on it.
Yeah, we could maybe talk to the amount of calls or referrals or whatever we have, but we don't have a percentage either, but same trends here at Sheriff's Office, it's police department. It's up there. It's also hit and miss. It's hard to tell.
Okay.
Over time of kind of gauge better, but there's not a clear avenue, and that's a true challenge for co-responder programs across the state of how to figure out an answer to that question, and we just ongoingly monitor and then make referrals. The Sheriff's Office and the PD make referrals over to Catherine for follow-up if she's not on shift. So
to add to that too, it's tough, and I guess to explain it better, because we may have criminal charges that encompass somebody with substance abuse or behavioral health, but like Laura's speaking to, we meet monthly with our state team, and everybody's having that same issue. Is how do you account for it and put them in the behavioral health line, or do you put them in the criminal charges line, so to speak? So it's tough to track, I guess, is what we're trying to say overall.
Okay. And how are your jails now structured regarding mental health inmates? Has the co-response program lowered the number of mental health inmates?
I would say it has overall, just because there's more programs and more resources we get out to them. I would say overall it has lowered it. We're able to get kind of ahead of that before they're incarcerated. They're already in programs. So I would say we're seeing a reduction.
And I think that speaks to what we talked about earlier with how Catherine follows up with referrals from officers. So maybe somebody dealt with an individual in our community and it didn't rise to the level of we need to call out Catherine a co-responder to that scene, or maybe she's not working then, instead of calling out crisis mobile unit, it may be, hey, we see this individual may have some behavioral health needs or substance abuse needs. We will send over a referral to Catherine and she'll follow up with them. And I think that's really seen that, where that individual, where we may be, for example, arresting them for open container in a public area on a daily basis. And with Catherine following up with that individual, we see that reduction. We're not dealing with them every day. We're not having to write them a citation or take them ultimately. And I think that's been a huge success. And they're again tracking that and being able to go forth, because there is also some privacy issues between mental health, what they can release to law enforcement and how we follow up with that. So speaking to it from an observation side on law enforcement, I think we've seen a huge reduction in that.
Okay, that's great. And this is perhaps related to that. Someone wants to know, how do you handle calls that escalate while you are on the scene? That is, someone starts out reasonable and escalates to become aggressive.
So again, we refer back to, from the law enforcement side, our training, the de-escalation, the crisis intervention training. That's our ultimate goal. Like I said, is learning, being able to communicate with somebody and get them talking and get them, you know, they could be up and down and they could try. The main thing is officer for law enforcement side remaining calm and just open up that line of communication is huge. Now, with that being said, sometimes you can't use de-escalation, and it be able to protect ourselves as well in our community. So sometimes, unfortunately, we have to use force, but the ultimate goal is never to have to use force to be able to de-escalate the situation and get them the help they need. But to be honest, sometimes that doesn't occur, and unfortunately, sometimes people have to be placed in custody or force needs to be used, and sometimes they have to go to jail. But the ultimate goal is to keep them out of jail.
And the vast majority of time, co-response calls are very safe. Law enforcement does a really great job of keeping not only the responders, but also the community members very safe.
And this program allows us to work with our community members and connect them with resources and provide them the support. So it's been great, and it doesn't matter. I mean, if an individual worst case, scenario ends up with a legal consequence, we can still work with them and we can still help them and we can still support them. And so it really does help us be able to provide supports for our community members that maybe otherwise we wouldn't be able to meet with. And so from our perspective, it's just been a great partnership. I cannot say enough kind things about our police department and sheriff's office when they respond. They are always with the mindset of trying to help our community members, to de-escalate the situation, to provide support. They respond with kindness and encouragement all the time. It's just, they're an impressive group of people to get to work with. So we're very, very grateful for the opportunity to participate in this program with them.
And speak back to that too. Like I said, the Center for Mental Health has been excellent. Some partners that we didn't talk about, we talked about the Crisis Walk-in Center, our mobile crisis unit, but also Montrose Fire Protection District. Those guys are excellent to work with. And same with the Memorial Hospital, ER staff and follow-up. Just as a community, we were just talking about this the other day. We have an excellent community. We live in a great community. And we're just big enough to see the behavioral health issues and the need for the co-response program, but we're also not a huge community, so we rely on each other a lot. The resources are limited here. Although we have great resources, they're limited. So we've learned to adopt and overcome and work together as a team, and it's been excellent. So our community and our partnerships are very valued in Montrose.
Well, that's great. And that ties into a kind of a two-part question I had about, do you ever have to send people to the hospital? And how does the hospital partner with your co-response program?
We sometimes do. I mean, we really provide whatever supports the individual needs. And so sometimes that does involve the emergency department. Sometimes it involves the crisis walk-in center. It's really just around whatever that individual needs based on what's going on with them. So our goal is always to provide the least amount of interventions as possible to meet their needs and to work with them to develop a plan to keep them safe and get the supports and connections to keep them in their home and their community. But sometimes people need a medical evaluation because, something has happened, or sometimes they need support through our withdrawal management program. And so really it's just an individualized response with whatever the person needs, keeping their safety as our top priority. And so it just depends.
Okay, thank you.
This program offers us a continuum, right? Like, so a co-responder on the scene would be the least intrusive way to provide the support that someone needs, rather than them going to an emergency room if they don't need that.
Well, as a follow-up to that, could you describe what the experience is like for a client who uses the walk-in center? What kind of care do they expect to receive there?
Sure. So our crisis walk-in center is located at 300 North Cascade, and it's available 24 hours a day. So I encourage anyone who needs at any time, day or night, to speak with someone, to just walk up. And in the center, we have what's called a walk-in center. It's just that straightforward. And you access that, and then you're able to meet with our staff and have an assessment for risk to meet your needs around what's going on. So a crisis assessment or a risk assessment to see what's going on with an individual, what are their behavioral health needs, and then from that assessment, our clinicians and team make a recommendation for the individual based on what they are coming to us and telling us what's going on that would continue to keep them safe and help their natural supports, their social supports, provide resources for them and connect them both that night and ongoing the next day, and further follow up to get them enrolled in behavioral health supports or whatever they need. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, just that we do have the stabilization unit as well as the withdrawal management as well for a variety of needs.
And I know you gave the number before that someone could call. Could you say it again, perhaps a little more slowly?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 970-252-6220. And that's the Center for Mental Health support line. And so I would just encourage people to call a question or concern.
All right. Okay. We have heard that elsewhere in the country, at least, that the COVID pandemic lockdown reflected depression and suicide trends. Have you seen that at all here?
So we have not seen that national trend reflected here. I think, it's really hard to say because we won't know the impact of the pandemic for years, right? Like, it's impossible still currently, we're still in it, to know the long-term impact. But we are continuing to monitor, and I would say a strength of our rural communities, kind of to what was being said earlier, is that we make up for what we maybe don't have in resources with partnerships coming together. And we've really seen that play out over in our community. So we've come together to support each other through this. We've come together as partner agencies. And so our community members, I think, have been able to access services as they've needed them, and are continuing to do that. And I would encourage it. And also, our community, is just been a little different than some of the urban communities. So, I give kudos all the time to our school district for working really hard to stay open and to be open this year. And that's not the experience of everyone across the state of Colorado, or let alone the nation. And so some of those things that are just really strengths of rural community, I think, have been good for all of us who live here while we've dealt with the stress of the pandemic. That's why I love rural communities. I don't know about you guys, but we are really good at taking care of each other.
Thank you. And Laura, you discussed the CoResponse program in Delta County. Is there a similar program in Ouray County?
There is not, and I have I'm pretty regular communication with law enforcement in Ouray County, and we've talked about some opportunities to provide supports. They do have access to our mobile response team, of course. One of the things to balance is that, again, because we're rural, our numbers are small, and our needs sometimes are less. And so how do we support our smaller communities like Ridgeway and Ouray, where our populations are smaller, and we may not need a full-time co-responder with consultation. We provide mobile response. And so we're looking at ways to be able to do that and meet the need for our for our small communities in our region.
Okay. This question is largely for Catherine. How many calls do you respond to in a week or a month? And then as a follow-up on that, do most of your calls happen at night?
Yeah, so the number of calls and referrals that I respond to is really variable. I think the lowest that I've ever seen my contacts were probably 10 a week, and now we're getting close to about probably 20, 25, maybe 30. I think we're getting close to a week, so it's pretty variable. What was the second part of the question?
Are most of your calls at nighttime?
No, they can be at any time that I'm on shift.
Okay.
And times that I'm off shift as well, in which case they're a referral for me the next day.
All right.
Yeah, we tracked that through our program and tried to kind of, staff to meet, the need, but it really is variable to what Catherine is saying. Like people's needs arise all throughout the day. And so it's not really an evening or night as you might expect, I think.
Okay. Is there a way for families to keep their problems private?
So let me make sure I can clarify the question that you're asking. If someone speaks with Catherine, is that a private conversation? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, or if they call in for a co-response, is this something that's going to end up in the newspaper on the police blotter page?
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Yeah.
No, it won't be released. Any kind of a behavioral health, if there's no criminal charges tied to that individual, and the only time it would be in the paper if there's criminal charges. If they're under the age of 18, it won't be in the paper no matter what, if there is charges or not. But just the co-responder of behavioral health or substance incident that does not rise to the level of criminal charges, it will not be in the paper.
Okay. And for the police department, we have a question that did the funding recently approved by voters for the police department, has that made a big difference to you?
Yes, we're very thankful for our community for supporting 2A. We're working through the challenges of getting officers hired, but we've done really well so far with the funding of the building. We got a new public safety facility coming on here. We'll be breaking ground in next month. But getting the resources that we need is huge for our community. Our officers are very busy right now. We've got a lot of calls for service. I was just looking at the screen. We've got approximately 10 calls up for service. So we're all busy. So we do very much appreciate the support from our community, and it is making a huge difference, and will continue to make a difference in our community with having more officers to respond to calls for service and to put in the proactive units that we would like to do, which also ties into this co-response program. We'd have more time, officers would have more time to train, more time to work on these specialty units to make our community safer and benefit the citizens of our community.
That's great. Could you describe how the police department and the Center for Mental Health interact with the schools?
So, I should probably let Laura speak to this mainly. She's the expert on this side of it. From Montrose PD's side, Commander Smith is the individual that is really tied in with our threat assessment. And I'll let Laura speak to that. But we work very well with our schools and we're in constant communication. We were just talking about a case this morning. We're in constant communication with our school districts, and there again, it's that very supportive team approach. So with that, I'll let Laura speak to it.
Yeah, sure. We partner, we have a very close relationship with our school district and we're very proud to be partners with them. We support both our suicide risk assessment and our student threat assessment teams in making sure that our students get the supports that they need in order to be safe and to get their mental health needs if they're identified. And so very glad for that. We just, similar to this program for CoResponse, have partnerships with the school districts that allow us to support our kiddos. So yeah, always available to support our schools whenever they need it.
Wonderful. And on the other end of the age spectrum, how do you respond to calls about elder abuse?
From the law enforcement side, we treat it just like anything else, whether it's a juvenile, elder abuse. We take every case very serious and we pour all of our resources into that individual. Like I said, there's no discrimination with anything, no group's different than the other. We treat everybody with dignity and respect. We try to provide the best services we can. And ultimately with an at-risk adult, if they are being scammed or abused, there is enhanced charges for that. So we definitely pay attention to that, and we will. If it comes to that, somebody is taking advantage of an at-risk adult, then they're going to be charged with that.
And we rely on our other partners too. We get adult protective services involved right away in situations like that. So there again, just our partnerships here are huge. Being a smaller community, we have tight niche groups, and we work with them very well too, but we get them involved right away on those types of calls.
It's the same that we need to get adult protection involved. We would of course do that right away and then connect individuals with whatever supports they need.
So I have a question. I have a question that ties in very closely with partnerships you mentioned, Ty and Laura. Are there ways that the League of Women Voters or other members of the public can either help with these other organizations or groups that you're involved in, or are there more direct ways that we can help support the CoResponse program?
That's a great question. Thank you. I mean, I think, opportunities like this to be able to share what we're doing are just huge for us. Like, we're so grateful that you give us the opportunity to talk today about how we're helping the community, with the goal, of course, from all of our perspectives, that the community will let us do that, will outreach when they need help, and know that we're here to support. So like, this is perfect. And I think, you guys, if you're willing, we would love to talk further about other partnerships like that we're participating in the community. There's a lot that our community has available to it. So I think this is tremendously helpful.
I have a question about how would you grow this program if more funds were available?
That's a great question. I mean, I think to what Tim was saying earlier, we would add more staff, so we had more availability throughout the week for CoResponse. I think that would be our kind of dream big goal.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's just the program. I don't think you want to grow too fast. It's kind of just gauging off of our community, and like I said, the reality of it right now, maybe it's adding one more co-responder for mental health, and then ultimately, like I said, getting that where it's a team effort. You got maybe you got a deputy from Montrose County Sheriff and a PD officer that work together as a team with that co-responder, and then maybe you have two, so you have those individual units, and it just makes for a better response in the end. So, but I think we can work towards that, and I think we already have from when we started in 2018 to where we're at now. I think we've seen a huge growth in how we respond and how we help the community. And we just got to be flexible. And I think that's the biggest thing we've learned is being flexible, and we'll adapt to anything, and bringing on new members like we talked about, and other supporting other communities has been huge as well. So.
So what is the biggest challenge to your program?
Well, I was going to say, like, our biggest challenge and concern is that we just want people to ask for help. And so we want people to call whatever avenue or number, whether that's the center's number or dispatch, just know that help's available and for it, so that we can provide help to our community members when they need it. Just know that we're here. Know we're here, and as a community, we want to be able to help our neighbors.
And I think to add to that, the education, like we're doing today, is huge. Education to our employees, and just having the time to do it and the resources. So moving forward, we've got a lot of plans that, like I said, it doesn't cost a whole lot to do, but just having the time and the resources to do it. And coming out of the pandemic too has been a challenge, but we're making huge strides, and I think we've seen a lot of good results from it.
Great. Well, if you do have criminal charges against an individual and the person ends up incarcerated, is there mental health counseling available to them in prison?
There is. The center is not providing that currently. There is a private contractor that works with the sheriff's office to provide that service.
Yeah, we have private service in the jail that will, if they're incarcerated, they also do mental health evaluations and keep up on that while they're incarcerated.
Okay. And is the homeless population, is that a community that needs your help? And how can we as a community help those folks?
That's a great question. We, are always supporting our community members, and when they're homeless, that often, means that there's a lot of stress that they're dealing with. So housing insecurity, food insecurity, financial insecurity are all significant stressors. So any way that you can support any of the agencies within our community that provide those supports, I think is helpful. And being passionate about helping our community members who are at any time in their lives is really important. When those individuals need behavioral health care, then we absolutely provide it and are happy to do that. And then we connect them once they become involved with the center with through our case management or through another agency with whatever they need to try to move them towards stability and whatever it is that their goal is for their life.
And I think that's important for the community to know too. It doesn't matter what anybody's status is. If somebody needs help, this team here is going to get them the help they need. And there's resources there to assist them. It doesn't matter what walk of life you come from. We're here to support you, and we're going to get you the resources.
All right, Carol, I'm going to turn it back over to you now.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Before we close this out, is there anything from our panelists that you would like to share related to this that didn't get brought up? Looks like, okay.
Okay.
I think we covered it pretty well.
All right. Well, then. Sorry, a little technical difficulty. Okay, so I want to thank our panelists for taking the time out of their very busy schedule to share this information with us. The screen shows their contact information and where you can go for additional information related to the CoResponse program. Laura, would you repeat that support phone line one more time?
Okay, good.
Thanks for asking. You can reach the Center for Mental Health support line for a mental health crisis or question or support at 970-252-6220.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, this program has been recorded and we'll be posting it to the League of Women Voters website. You can see that on the lower left, www.lwvmontrose.org. And now I will turn it back to Jan Edwards, our League President, for her closing remarks.
Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you've enjoyed our presentation and found it valuable to your understanding of the issues discussed. Recording of this program, as Carol said, as well as information on our presentation upcoming, the Colorado Self-Sufficiency Standard will be held at noon on April the 8th. All that information is available on our website at lwvmontrose.org. Have a great day. Thank you.